Hey everybody, Chris MLC. Welcome back to the channel. Now in this video, we're going to do some more work on the 50. I've been waiting on some parts, stockpiling a few things. I was having a hard time trying to find a decent 4L60, but I finally got one. The motor's over there, the transmission's here. We got the transmission mount, we have the headers, we have an engine mount kit. So we have everything we need to move forward. We have the steering components. I made some rack mounts today because we're gonna have to move the rack mount. We have to move the rack out and up. And then I also bought a Mustang 2 bump steer kit so we can get the rack arms into the right relation with the lower control arms. Well, let's go have a look at the rack and I'll show you what I've done there. All right, so here we are at the rack. What I had to make was some standoffs to get this thing out away from the cross member. And I machined some holes here on each side so we can get to the nut, but we still got to come over here to the front end and we need to cut off that mount. So we're gonna have to take the lowers off here real fast, get the front end stripped off so we can get them off there, get them ground, and then we can move forward with bringing that over and putting that on there. Now this is my plan with the steering. I wanted to retain the stock steering column, and I was watching a video on H's performance site, and he did this same deal. I made a spacer bushing that fits into the steering column. Then I machined this end to accept a 3/4 inch wheelbarrow bearing, and then I just have a lock collar here for right now, and then it'll go down to a U-joint, then down to the rack. But this is not cut the length yet. It's probably gonna end up more up here. I wanna get the steering column where I'm happy with it inside first, and then once the engine's sitting in here and we get the transmission, we put the headers on there, then we can get everything sort of into a final position. But I got our 4L60 and we've got our 5.3. So I got to get the 5.3 stripped down. We'll pull the torque converter out of the 4L60. We'll get her mounted up behind there. And thanks to my buddy PJ, we have some headers for it. So yeah, we got all the parts I was needing to get moving along on this thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and set you down. We'll get all the front suspension tore off this thing and we'll get to put this rack on. Okay, so here's where we're at with the rack. Move a couple things here. Now I went ahead and I got the rack positioned. I welded in this mount. I had a couple of these little tabs left from bracing the A-arm mount, so I used them as little lateral supports there. Now the paperwork I found last night for the rack was I needed to have from the center of that mounting bolt to the center of the lower control arm mount needed to be 2.5 inches. So we have that, and it has the correct spacing on the lower, which is 22.25 from center of that lower to the center of that lower. So we should be where we need to be, and we got plenty of clearance over here from the rack servo. And this is giving you an idea. We've got a bar here in that U-joint, and we're gonna end up somewhere right in this area. So the U-joint's gonna be, let's see if I can pull that off there. You know, so we're gonna be something like that for the steering. And that puts us, it's kind of nice because that puts us inside the frame rail all the way up to here. So without putting the motor in here, to clear the headers, I may have to shift the motor over just slightly, maybe a 1/2 inch or so. So that's all working out. That's going to work out pretty well. Now that brings us to our second issue here. Like I still need the rack mounts I made are slotted up and down, so I can move this. I need to level this rack down a little bit. But you can see now the difference between our tie rod, our outer tie rod here, and the spindle. So if we were going to try to use, like you can imagine the stock ball joint came out to here. This would have been running uphill. So in order to keep as much bump steer out of this front end as possible, we need to have this tie rod, this outer tie rod here of the rack, needs to be parallel to our lower control arm. That is where this comes in handy. Competition Engineering C2408 79 to 93 Mustang bump steer adjuster kit. Now we got new studs for the spindle. We have new sleeves for the rack. Then we'll have our heim joint rod end that is going to become our ball joint. So basically, let's see if we can do this one-handed here. So that is basically what we're gonna have. This, I'm gonna have to take a little bit off the rack here, because right now the rack's centered, and I still want to account for a jam nut out here on the rod end. So we're gonna have to probably, I think it's gonna be a little bit of both. We're gonna have to take a little bit off this guy here, then we'll take a little bit off the rack, just sort of split the difference, so we're gonna be able to align this thing. But that gives you an idea of what we're doing here. So this is gonna allow us this extended stud. There's spacers that go in here. And nice thing is, I got a lathe, and if we need to cut a spacer to get this right, we'll cut a spacer to get it right. But we're gonna get this arm of the rack parallel with the lower control arm. And having this bump steer kit from Comp Engineering is gonna allow us to do that. So you're seeing right now, that's, I mean, relatively close right there. So you're already seeing what we're gonna be needing for spacers right here, something about that. And then we'll probably put one down here on the bottom, then we'll just tighten that up. I'm happy. Like I said, the rack's still gotta be lowered just a little bit on this side. And then that's gonna tell us we're gonna end up with probably more spacer on this side, but it all just needs welded up right now. What I had to do here, this might not be the case for yours, but the compensating I had to do to line the ball joint up on the lower control arm with the center of that K member may be different from yours. I don't know. I've been speaking to another gentleman that has the same kit as that I do, and he seems to be running into a lot of the same problems. Now, what I ended up with here for the rack spacers, to get the rack out away from the lower and get some clearance between the boot and the bolt, I ended up with 3-inch spacers. These are 2-inch by 3-inch 11 gauge rectangle tubing. I put some 1/4 by 2 down the front of it, and then I put it in the mill and I machined a slot, and then I came into the side and I milled openings on both sides of this thing, so I get the nut in there. Total, they're 3 inches tall from this mounting surface to that mounting surface. It's 3 inches. Still got to trim these little fellows off here, but I had some extra of these little gussets from these mounts, so I just took them and I used them down here for like a lateral brace. So I think I'm going to pull the rack off, finish welding up the rest of the gussets on this side, and then we'll look at the bump steer on this side, figure out how much we got to cut off the rack, but I really need to get the other side on there, and we'll do some measuring. All right, guys. Well, I got the first side of the front end done. I got the passenger side set up. I'll show you before and after here what we did. The bump steer kit worked out really well. It does have to be modified, so does the rack, but I will show you what I had to do for my instance. Now, it may not be the same for yours. This will at least maybe give you a starting point and an idea, if you're working with the same stuff, what you're gonna have to do. So here we are on the passenger side with everything installed. Now you can see this is the adjuster that comes with the bump steer kit from Competition Engineering. Now, there used to be a little boss like this on this side. Now, this side's threaded for the rack shaft. The other side right here, only this section here, is threaded for the rod end. Now, from here all the way this way is threaded for the rack shaft. So that still leaves you this whole flat area here with threads. Now, what I did was I just came in here right to this line here on this side, and I just cut that off. Then we'll spin this out of the way. I took it down to my lathe and I cleaned up the end. Then I just sort of rounded the edges off there, if that will come into focus. There you go. All right, jamming that back up there. Like nothing's set here yet, but we have plenty of adjustment because you got this full length here. You got rod end because this is threaded. So when you spin this, it adjusts. So we'll put that in there right now. Fix that. Now here's the one from the kit before being modified. So I removed this whole section right here. Got rid of that. Then what I had to take off the rack is right there. It mounts to about 1 1/8 plus the cut. So you're probably taking off a little more than, well, with my saw, you're taking off about 1 1/4 inches. Now, not saying that's gonna be the size you need to cut off. Okay, so we're gonna take this one off here. We'll take it over to the Evolution, cut it down, and then we'll take it down to the lathe and clean it up. There we go. All right, now what we're gonna do here is I went ahead and put the nut back on the rack, and we are going to use our freshly cut off sleeve to help us determine what we need to cut off here. So I still want to be able to move in and out and have some measurement there. Out's not a problem because you're gonna gain length from the rod end and you're gonna gain length from the rack rod. So what I'm looking at here, you know, if I take probably about the same amount I took off the other one, we take that 1 inch off there, we should be fine. Now an easy way to do this is we're just gonna come in here and we're gonna spin that nut. Took 1 1/8 inches off the other side. All right, there we go. We'll just come in here, put the grinder right up against the edge of that nut, and we'll go through. Now I can come here and just run that nut out. Use that nut to help clean up our We're just going to run this in until the rack bottoms out on the rod end shank. And if we have to get a little more, if we're towed out too far, like, okay, we're out right there. which I don't think is going to be a problem. We got more than enough. There we go. 53 and a 16th. Just to see where we are, how square with each other we are, where we're at. We're 53 and 3/16 on the front, and we're 53 and 3/16 on the back. And all I did on this side was, just for right now, I just pulled a measurement from the rotor to the center, and then we're 53 and 3/16 both sides to the back. And you see what we had to adjust out here a little bit. We can turn that in, put that up against there, and then we can put that in against there. So for right now, that is as close to the square as we're gonna get without having to like string to the rear end and get it done that way. So yeah, there it is. So the rack came from Speedway. I'll put the part number down in the video description. I'll put the part number for the Mustang bump steer kit in the description. And if anyone's interested in these parts, the rack spacing, rack mount, rack spacers, I can send you quick drawings of what I did there, and I'll take care of that. So the next thing we're going to tackle here real quick is we're going to get the steering shaft laid out here. We're going to figure out, sit in the car, figure out where I want it. I haven't really decided whether or not I'm leaving the bench seat or whether I'm going to go to buckets. The more I sit in the bench seat, the more it grows on me. I really wanted buckets, but maybe I'll just leave the bench seat. I'm not sure. I'm undecided. So, but for right now, what we'll do is we'll get in there. We'll get seated how we like in the bench seat. I'll pull the steering wheel to where I like it, and then we'll tighten down the lower shaft clamp down there, and then we can go ahead and get our measurements on where we want to cut the outer steering shaft, the inner steering shaft, and get set up for our knuckle. I got the steering column cut down. Here's the reducer I made for it. Had to turn down the OD to get inside this original steering column. Then I had to bore the ID to accept this wheelbarrow bearing. And there that is. And our steering shafts comes through. We just take this lock washer, or lock collar, put that on there, and there we go. All right, guys, well, there it is. I got it in. We got steering shaft shortened. Plenty of clearance. Go ahead and turn it to it's got plenty of turn, and that's the tire we're going to be using. It's 245 45/17. There's to the other lock. Like, this brake bracket's going to go away, but we should be good. Fitting. The next problem I see is fitting a sway bar. That's going to get interesting. But no, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. A lot of work, a little longer than I expected, but I've just been waiting on parts. I'm in no really big hurry with this project. Yeah, I want to get it done. Would like to get it out, but not for the sake of rushing. I got the steering column set to a distance that feels comfortable for me. I mean, I like it. I mean, rest my arm here right in the window. hold the steering wheel, sort of rest hand on my leg. As for the steering, I still got to make the bump stops, get them all set. But it comes with an assortment of them. We'll just have to see if the ones that are in the box will work with what we need. If not, we have a lathe. We can make them. Yeah. No, pretty happy. One thing down in a long list of things to do for the 50 Chevy. Now, I think maybe this evening I'm going to strip down the 5.3, get it where we can go ahead and get it set inside the engine compartment, get the transmission bolted to it, and I think next we're going to work on the motor mounts and transmission mount. So that should be fun. Everything is here for that, with the exception of some tubing, but there is more than enough tubing and plate laying around here. We should be able to make what we need. Still got to clean that fire. The next thing I really have to do is I need to finish cleaning that firewall off, and we're going to have to notch the firewall for the right bank of the LS to sit back in there. Like I said, part numbers for everything will be down in the video description. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment down there. That's going to help out with the algorithm, get the video out to more people. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the channel. Remember to hit the bell icon down in the corner so you know when to upload new content. And I will see you in the next video.